Galw'r aelodau I drefn. On behalf of all members, I'd like to welcome Jack Sargent to the Senedd and congratulate him and congratulate you on your recent by-election success. You are following in a tradition of proud representatives of Alun and Deeside in this place, and we all wish you well. Jack Sargent.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I firstly thank you for letting me make this statement today. Really means a lot to me. I want to take this opportunity to thank all the members across this chamber for their words of congratulations following the recent by-election in Alun and Deeside. From the members of the security team, the catering staff, the AIM support staff, not to forget the drivers, the kind of words of congratulations has been really overwhelming. It is customary, of course, to pay tribute to, in your first statement, to pay tribute to your predecessor. Not often, though, are they in those circumstances that I find myself in today, because not only am I paying tribute to someone who loved his constituency and who loved Wales and fought tirelessly across his constituency and across Wales for those who are less able to stand up for themselves, I'm also paying tribute to the man that I knew as Dad. The man I loved going for a pint with, the man who helped me with my exams, the man who stood by my side right through life and stood so proud when I graduated. The man that was the glue of my family and held us together on many occasions. But he was also the man who showed me that being the right sort of politician wasn't about being the right sort of politician in the Assembly chamber, but it was something that you did in every interaction with every person, no matter who they were or what their situation was. It was important to him that their issues and concerns were listened to and understood. And although we know that was my dad, we've been touched and comforted by the outpouring support and solidarity that we've seen from people right across Alun and Deeside, right across Wales and across the United Kingdom. And here in the Assembly, I know you all knew him as my dad as well. We are, of course, devastated beyond words, and we know that our grief will continue to be shared by everyone who knew him and loved him, and many others, strangers who didn't have the chance to meet him. And I also want to say how proud I am to have friends and family here in the gallery today watching me on my first session. So thank you to you, all of you here today, and all the family members and friends across Alun and Deeside and further afield. My dad was truly loved by his community and the people, the special people of Alun and Deeside. He loved the sense of togetherness, and our community's problems was everyone's problems. That's clear by the way the local people come together when times get tough. Alun and Deeside has been through many tough times, but it's that sense of community and looking after each other that we, as a family, have seen more than ever in recent months. Like much of North East Wales, it has a large manufacturing base. It's something we're all so proud of, and we're also so proud that it's not just holding its own where we are now, but we're also moving into the forefront of the manufacturing industry and embracing the new technology to create jobs for the future. Great jobs for the future. But we must carry on, and we must do more to build, to give better opportunities to our young people and all those, our current generation as well, to make sure our communities have the right infrastructure and services for the future. The Airbus plant in Broughton employs 7,000 people and supports businesses directly and indirectly right across the region and further into the northwest of England as well. The plant specialises in manufacturing wings and the majestic beluga, transporting those wings once they are completed all across Europe. I was pleased to meet with United Shop stewards during the campaign, and I look forward to returning there soon to discuss what we can do further. My constituency is also the home of Deeside College, Coleg Cambria, which has students right across North East Wales and Cheshire. and I gained my engineering apprenticeship there, which I'm so very proud of, and I want to see it to continue to grow from strength to strength, and I want to see that the young people benefit from the opportunities that we and the college provide them. Opportunities which, if we get right, can put Wales in the forefront of our industrial revolution. And for those sporting fanatics, there is a strong local heritage in Allen and Deeside, and Deeside College's main stadium is the home of Gap Conisky Nomads, which I had the pleasure to visit during the campaign as well with Tom Watson, which was great. Not only that, we've had some great footballers from the constituency. Michael Owen, the late Gary Speed, which was fantastic to meet with Roger Speed just on Sunday. What a true gentleman he was. But I would never be able to let this down if I couldn't thank and mention my own local team, FC Nomads of Conisky, and club chairman Bernie Attridge. So I really want to say thank you to everything he's done, and we'll keep that support going. And good luck on the weekend, guys. Now, I said last week that this by-election was a by-election that no one wanted to see. And I am not the only person in this chamber who wants justice for my father, my dad. I know from the campaign we have just conducted that this feeling is shared by the constituents and the community, but further across field in Wales and the UK as well. And alongside my political work in this chamber, I will also be working to ensure that the inquiries underway will examine the way my dad was treated in the run-up to his death. I owe my family, my friends, my constituents, and no less my dad for that. Finally, Presiding Officer, I was truly honoured and humbled to have been elected as our great area's new Labour AM last week. And I want to thank all the local Labour members and others for their work during the campaign, during the snow when we got out on that doorstep. And I also want to thank all the colleagues from the Assembly that came up to help me with that in a snowy Tuesday in February. So thank you all. But most importantly, I want to thank the voters of Allen and Deeside for putting their faith in me. I'm in this place to be a strong voice representing the interest, building on the work started by my dad. Jobs and skills, aiming to end youth homelessness and working to end the epidemic of domestic violence, domestic abuse, and work to ensure that this government listens to people, real people from my constituency and across North Wales and the whole of Wales. Real people, and we deliver the policies which will work for them. And there is no greater tribute I could pay to my dad than continuing his legacy and his work and all the service that he provided for our special people up in Allen and Deeside. That's what I intend to do, and I hope, as the representative of the new generation in the Assembly, I can do something to build a better, kinder politics for the future. Thank you.
Diolch i Jack Sargent. Yr eitem gyntaf felly, yr eitem nesaf yw cwestiynau i'r prif weinidog. A'r cwestiwn cyntaf, Caroline Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister outline how the Welsh Government is tackling poverty in South Wales West?
Yes, Prosperity for All sets out how we will support people from disadvantaged households to achieve their potential and live fulfilled lives. And we are investing in the future of our children and growing our economy. The Valleys Ministerial Task Force will improve outcomes as well, of course, for the valleys of South Wales West.
Thank you, First Minister. My region is now one of the poorest regions in the UK. It has the lowest employment rate in Wales, high levels of economic inactivity and some of the lowest gross disposable household income in the UK. After nearly 20 years of Labour's economic plans, things are going in the wrong direction. My region doesn't need economic tinkering like the disastrous techniums nor empty enterprise zones. It needs a low-tax, business-friendly economy to encourage businesses to invest in the region. The world's most successful small computing platform...
Can you come to a question, please?
Yes, is already produced in Bridgend in my region. We should be building a high-tech cluster around Pencoed and lower taxes in the catalyst we need. First Minister, what discussions have you had with your colleague, the Finance Secretary, about emulating Ireland and encouraging high-tech businesses like Intel and Apple to set up shop in Wales by offering them tax breaks once we are free from EU state aid rules?
Now, let me just understand this point if I can. Last week, UKIP were arguing that they didn't want to see new taxes. And now they're saying they want to see business taxes, which aren't devolved. You want to see business taxes devolved to this Assembly. Is that what you're saying? Because that's the logical consequence of what you're saying.
Yes, we want.
And then we have the next question. How do you pay then for public services if there is a gap in the public tax take? And I have to say that she contradicted herself in the course of that question. She said that South Wales West was one of the poorest areas of Wales. Then she went on to name some of the successes, one of them in my constituency, that we have seen as a result of the Welsh Government's work in attracting investment into Wales. What is UKIP's economic plan? Cut us off from our closest, most important market, where 60% of our exports go, where 90% of our food and drink exports go. That is not an economic plan that will work for the future. And I can say, as far as GBA figures are concerned, we know that Wales is the fastest growing country in the UK for GBA rising to nearly £60 billion in 2016, and we know that our employment rate is continuing to grow. That's because of the hard work we have put in as a Welsh Government, making sure that we have jobs for our people.
Dai Lloyd.
Diolch, Llywydd. Much of the Welsh Government's focus on economic development in South Wales West is based on creating two strategic hubs in Neath and North Bridgend as part of the Valley's Task Force, as I'm sure you're well aware. And a key element of that is the release of employment land for industrial use. Now, given that that is also the case for most of the strategic hubs across the rest of the South Wales valleys, do you agree that there's a risk that unless specific sectors and companies are targeted in a systemic way, that your government risks flooding the market with a release of land which you simply will not be able to fill?
No, that's the old WDA model, where you have land, you build lots of empty buildings, and those buildings are not filled. We want to make sure that as far as demand is concerned, it's closely matched to supply, and of course we look at areas of Wales where there is the skills base to attract further investment. And that's precisely, of course, why we have an economic action plan that has at its heart the need to target regions of Wales according to their strengths.
Mick Antonev.
First Minister, we were told in a recent committee evidence session into homelessness that one of the main causes now of homelessness is the UK Government's welfare reform programme. Do you agree that even at this late stage, it is not too late for the UK Government to stop the rollout of this disastrous universal credit programme?
Yeah, absolutely, but they're not listening, are they? I went to visit people who were homeless before Christmas. I advised the Conservatives to do the same. Perhaps they might learn something. But the reality is that they are indifferent to the suffering of people who are homeless. They are indifferent to the problem of rough sleeping. The Leader of the Opposition sits there from his country estate and condemns people for being homeless. That is the reality of where he comes from. We as a party have committed £10 million to ending... I know it hurts. I know it hurts you. And I know, you don't like the truth. I understand that. We have committed £10 million to end the scourge of youth homelessness, while the Conservatives have sat and done nothing.
Question 2, Mick Antonev.
First Minister, what discussions have you had with the UK Government on the post-Brexit economic forecast for Wales?
Well, I've repeatedly and consistently raised with the Prime Minister and other UK Government ministers the potential serious economic harm to Wales arising from Brexit. And that includes highlighting the analysis that we published in our Securing Wales's Future White Paper last year and our recent trade policy document.
Well, First Minister, it seems the cat is now out of the bag, that the Government's real evidence as to the impact of Brexit without access to the single market is something that's going to cause significant damage to the Welsh economy. It appears only AMs in Wales are allowed to see these documents, provided we do that within certain restricted conditions, that our members of the public, our constituents, aren't allowed to share this information. But the outcome of that evidence is that effectively, depending upon what level of access we may or may not have to the European market, that we will suffer an economic hit of around 1.5% or up to 9.5% to our economy. If we had a 9% hit to our Welsh economy, what would be the implications for Wales of jobs and the standard of living of the Welsh people?
Well, we will lose jobs and incomes would decline. I can't understand why the UK government is being so secretive about these analyses and not sharing them more widely with people. It doesn't sound to me like a great deal of transparency certainly is exercised by the UK government in Whitehall. And can I say, the one thing that we are lacking here is that there are those who say that we will be better off outside the single market and the customs union. Not one scrap of evidence has been produced to support that. Not one scrap of evidence. And the reality is, it's about time that the Tories moved away from wishful thinking, saying, yeah, it'll all be fine, don't worry about it. Don't worry about the experts, don't worry about the analyses, don't worry about the reports, they're all wrong. And came clean with the people of Britain and said, well, actually, when we say we want to leave the single market and the customs union, we were wrong, because everybody else can see that that's exactly what's happening now.
Russell George.
Post-Brexit, First Minister, can I ask what plans does the Welsh Government have to dramatically increase Wales's economic intelligence capacity in order to improve public policy planning and delivery in Wales?
Well, of course, we have IPBW, but also we're looking to increase the number of offices in key markets abroad, working, of course, with the appropriate UK government departments. And that is something we're doing in the course of this year. We find that they are exceptionally important in terms of sourcing potential investment, sourcing potential markets for Welsh produce. I know how important our Dubai office was to us when we got Welsh lamb into the United Arab Emirates. And so looking for new markets is an important part of the plan we have to deal with Brexit.
Adam Price.
Mae dros flwyddyn ers I chi cyhoeddi'r papur gwyn yn neud yr achos I Gymru aros o fewn y farchnad singl ar undeb tolle. I chi ddim wedi medru perswadio Theresa May o'r polisi hynny, a falle bod modd maddau I chi am hynny, ond pam I chi ddim wedi medru perswadio Jeremy Corbyn?
Wel, dwi ddim yn gyfrifol am beth sy'n digwydd yn Llundain, ond wy'n gwybod bod wedi trafod hwn yn fanwl gyda Keir Starmer, a fi'n gwybod hefyd, wrth gwrs, bod sefyllfa Blaid Lafur yn newid wrth edrych ar amgylchiadau, yn gwaedweud yn blwm ac yn blaen. O ran safbwynt ni, y ffordd orau Gymru I sicrhau bod yna ddyfodol disgwyl economaidd gyda ni yw sefyll yn y farchnad sengl a yw sefyll yn yr undeb tollau.
Cwestiynau nawr gan arweinwyr y pleidiau arweinydd yr wrthblaid, Andrew A.T. Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and with your permission, could I extend a welcome to the new member from Allen and Deeside on behalf of the Welsh Conservatives in the National Assembly and wish him well in his political career. First Minister, last week, Aelodau'r came forward with a projected deficit at the end of the financial year of some £70 million. This builds on two previous deficits of £47 million and £32 million in the previous 2 years. In October 2016, this health board was taken into targeted intervention, and that targeted intervention was worked by the Welsh Government to build a sound financial footing. What's gone wrong?
I should have welcomed our new member as well, our youngest member. I've done it personally, and I joined the Leader of the Opposition in doing that. What can I say? The Health Secretary has made it clear to the Aelodau'r board that the level of deficit is unacceptable. He's also been clear that difficult decisions are needed to ensure the future sustainability of health services in Aelodau'r. The board were given a clear target to not exceed their planned deficit of £58.9 million, but it wasn't until December that they said they would miss this target. There are still significant concerns with financial management and reporting within the board, which we are following up in detail with them, and we are confident that the Health Board will still balance overall in the current year, even with this increased deficit in Aelodau'r.
First Minister, my question was, what's gone wrong? This is a health board that was put into, I think the word is targeted intervention, some 18 months ago, along with 3 other health boards, and obviously the special measures health boards of Betsy up in the north. So 4 of our health boards are under some form of government intervention. This escalation in the deficit up to £70 million, building on 2 previous substantial deficits, clearly shows that that financial oversight, and it was specific to financial oversight that the Welsh Government intervened, is not working in this health board. Now, we know there's a consultation about reorganisation of health services in Hywel Dda. We know from the apology you gave last week that you don't give apologies that easy, in fairness, and come into this chamber because of the misinformation that our health board handed over to you. Really, how can anyone have any confidence in the ability of the health board to deliver health services in West Wales for in excess of 10% of the population of Wales? £70 million deficit. How on earth is that deficit going to be brought back under control whilst maintaining services and getting on top of waiting lists?
Well, I should have clarified we're confident the health budget will still balance overall rather than the health board budget, and make that clear. Well, look, the health boards, all health boards across Wales, have a duty to ensure safe and sustainable services. That means they have to put forward suggestions for how that is to be done. I appeal to members not to just oppose any changes as they arise, because there are difficult questions here. And in fairness, the Parliamentary Review has looked at how we make the health system in Wales and social care system more sustainable in the future. We need to have a serious examination of what should be provided where. Sure, services as close to home as possible, but that might mean service changes in the future. And these are issues which need to be looked at dispassionately and sensibly before any decisions are taken.
First Minister, you talked about members looking at changes. One of your own ministers has said that she would vote against any changes that will come forward from the consultation. So from within your government, people are casting that aspersions about the consultation process. I've put to you twice now the escalation in the deficit situation that Hywel Dda faces. £70 million, £148 million of deficit over 3 years. It's not unreasonable for people in West Wales, as I said, in excess of 10% of the Welsh population rely on that local health board to deliver health services in rural locations. I really would appreciate, I'm sure many members in this institution, along with members of the communities down in West Wales, some roadmap that the Welsh Government might have to rescue this situation, because the deficit is getting worse, waiting times are getting worse, the ability to attract staff to fill vacancies is not succeeding, and in fact workforce planning is woefully inadequate in that part of Wales, as we know. So on the third question, can you give us a roadmap of what the Welsh Government will be doing with the Health Board to bring this deficit under control so people can have confidence that they will have a health service in this part of Wales? Yeah.
Well, firstly, he's not correct in terms of what he's quoted the Minister as saying. Secondly, the Health Board have published a consultation which contains various options. Difficult, some of them, no question about that, but it's the Health Board's responsibility to come forward with proposals, and that's exactly what it has done. And I have to say to the Leader of the Opposition, we have seen for 8 years cuts in the Welsh budget. We could be £4 billion by one estimate better off if he had actually made representations to his government in London. But he has sat there and done nothing. Ruth Davidson sits in the UK Cabinet. He isn't allowed through the door. The Northern Ireland executive was given £1 billion, if I remember rightly, for health, certainly hundreds of millions of pounds. Wales received nothing. There was no consequential. There was no extra money for Scotland and Wales. Can I suggest that while we are sorting out the mechanics of how our health boards work, he actually does something and does what his Scottish colleague does and actually stand up for his own...
Can I move a point of order? The First Minister's misrepresented.
No, there is no point of order. Leanne Wood.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, you stated last September that you wanted to see a justice system, and I quote, that was truly representative of Welsh needs. The priorities are to improve access to justice, to reduce crime and to promote rehabilitation. We know that your Commission is due to report back in 2019, but that's a little bit late to ensure that justice policy can be devolved in a decisive and clear way in time for the next Welsh Parliament. Are you confident that the case for a distinctive Welsh justice system will be strengthened by your Commission, and that quick progress can be made if it reports back with compelling evidence for change?
Well, yes, I mean, on the swift change, that is a matter, of course, to the UK Government, but we would urge them to follow the recommendations in the report. we've tended to focus on what this would mean for the courts, the probation service, and also, of course, the issue of the jurisdiction, which have been well debated within this chamber. But of course, if we look at the justice system, we have to develop a Welsh penal policy, something we've never had before and something that we'd have to start from scratch. So all these things have to be examined carefully as we look at the potential devolution of justice. The jurisdiction point, to me, is unanswerable. And this is the only jurisdiction anywhere in the world, common law jurisdiction, where there are two legislatures in the same jurisdiction. It makes no sense. I mean, I know people out there are not exactly rioting in the streets on this issue, but it makes no sense from a legal perspective. It means that people are misled when they look at the law. Some people believe that when a bill is titled, and Simon Thomas brought this to the Chamber a few months ago, this is the law of England and Wales, but it doesn't apply in Wales. It causes confusion, it makes no sense, and it's always been the case that where a legislature acquires primary powers, that the jurisdiction always follows. That's one issue, but then, of course, we get on to what should a Welsh penal policy look like in the future.
I agree with you, First Minister, and that's why it's such a shame that the opportunity was missed when the last Wales bill was going through. There is one case that demonstrates to me in a very striking way why we must have control over our criminal justice system and why that must happen soon. The case of Conor Marshall of Barry demonstrated huge failings in the probation system. He was brutally murdered by someone who was on probation, who was not being sufficiently supervised under the system that has been privatised since 2014. Conor's murderer missed 8 probation appointments. Now, there's a clear link between privatisation of the probation service, the pursuit of profit, and poor performance in supervision and monitoring. There has been no improvement in probation outcomes since privatisation began. Staff numbers are down 30% and reoffending rates are up. First Minister, leaving Welsh probation services in the hands of Westminster has not worked. The case of Conor Marshall shows that the public is not safe under this system. Will you support Conor Marshall's family's call for an inquiry into the actions of working links in this case? And when Wales does gain responsibility for criminal justice policy, do you agree with me that probation services should be brought back under public control?
Well, I'm not familiar with the case, but I will look at it and write back. I think that's the proper way to deal with what the Leader of Plaid Cymru has asked for. I couldn't agree. We're in agreement a lot this afternoon. I couldn't agree more with what you said. Why would you take a service that is designed to rehabilitate offenders and try and make a profit out of it? You know, there is no sense in that, and I absolutely agree that I say hopefully when, not if, we get control of the probation service, that we can have a properly functioning, publicly run and accountable probation service in the future, not what we have now. Because clearly, to my mind, the case is, well, not just the case is not made for a privately run probation service, it's been something that I don't think has been a great success. And she is somebody who, with her background, is passionate about probation and the need to rehabilitate offenders. It does society no good at all if they do not have the means and ability to find a way to rehabilitate themselves and remove themselves as a nuisance or a danger to the public. And in the future, I'd like to see a situation where it is in this chamber and, of course, through the Welsh Government that the probation service is shaped in Wales.
Again, First Minister, I have to express regret to you that we weren't having this discussion before. We could have prevented the privatisation of the probation service. I do now, though, want to turn to the question of super prisons. I'm appalled to see prisons held up as a tool for economic development when their main role is to deliver rehabilitation through custodial sentences. Prisoners now are being moved to Wales who are not from Wales to serve their custodial sentences, and that means that they're moved further away from their families and support networks, and as you know, being close to your family and support network is a very important aspect of rehabilitation. Figures this week show a concerning range of incidents that have taken place in HMP Berwyn within its first year of operation, which surely raises questions about the need for another super prison at Port Talbot. If we were developing a Welsh justice system, we would not need a new super prison. While prison services are not devolved, you can make the decision on the sale of Welsh Government land for the Port Talbot super prison. will you now commit to using that land for sustainable economic development and not a prison? And will you make a commitment that you will not facilitate a super prison that doesn't meet the needs of Wales?
We have had questions of the Ministry of Justice which have not yet been satisfactorily answered. We have taken no decision on the sale of the land. I know the representations that have been made. In some ways, the issue is bound up with the Commission for Justice, in the sense of what should a Welsh penal policy, or Welsh sentencing policy as well, look like in the future. It's right to say there are Welsh prisoners serving sentences a long way from home as well in England, the category prisons in England. How do we resolve that situation to ensure that people can serve their sentences closer to home, certainly towards the end of their sentences, when they are closer to release and, we hope, rehabilitation? But as I say, as far as Baglin is concerned, no decision has been taken. We are not yet in a position where we feel confident that we can take a decision because the full information has not been provided.
Arweinydd Grŵp UKIP, Neil Hamilton.
Llywydd, and with permission, I'd also like to welcome Jack Sargent to the Assembly and to congratulate him on the maturity of his opening speech, very confidently delivered, and we look forward to hearing a lot more of him. The First Minister will know that lots of people in North Wales think the letters NHS stands for National Health Shambles. Since 2010, the NHS has cut the number of beds in Wales by 18%, but in Betsy Cadwaladr Health Board, they've been cut by even more, down by 21%. 10 days ago, the Betsy Cadwaladr senior staff met with Denbigh councillors to explain why they're cutting 10 beds in Denbigh Hospital but only opening 5 in Ruthin. Last week, the Daily Post reported that health chiefs are blaming extraordinary ongoing pressures for patients sleeping in equipment rooms and in corridors in Llandudno General Hospital because of a lack of hospital beds. And Margaret Cowan, who was visiting her father in that hospital, said there used to be 12 wards in Llandudno. Now we have only 3 left. The people of this town deserve to know what is going on. Can the First Minister tell the people of Wales what is going on in the National Health Service in Wales?
Funding it at a level higher than England. That's what happens with the health service in Wales, making sure that the money is available for health and social care. We're seeing social care collapsing in England. We're seeing councils declaring themselves, Tory councils declaring themselves bankrupt in England. So making sure the money is there. Yes, there are challenges, and we know that. And those challenges will need to be met head-on by the health boards. But he says National Health Shambles. Perhaps he would like to put that to the doctors and nurses who work in the health service, both in North Wales and elsewhere. And let me remind him, and I'll take him there perhaps when it's built, of the Sy'n in Ysbyty Glan Clwyd. A major investment in Ysbyty Glan Clwyd. An investment decision that was taken by me at a time when it was being suggested that those services should move over the border. I made sure that an independent group of experts was brought together and a case was made to ensure that it was built in Ysbyty Glan Clwyd. So we will ensure that where those services can be made available to the people of North Wales, that they are made available, and the Sy'n is an example of that.
Knows that for every success there are masses of failures, and 4 of the health boards out of 7 are in special measures or target intervention, as the Leader of the Opposition pointed out earlier on. The Welsh Labour Government has a direct responsibility for the state of the health service in Wales. The Cabinet Secretary chairs meetings of the Betsy Cadwaladr Health Board now, and a statement was issued on the 1st of February saying that the Welsh Government continues to work with the board to ensure patients are not adversely affected by the need to improve financial management. We know, though, from the report that Deloitte's made on the financial recovery group in Betsy, that governance structure is poorly defined and misunderstood by board members themselves. This financial recovery group meets in private. It doesn't publish any of its papers, and it doesn't actually publish any minutes. So there's a secret financial recovery review which is being hidden from the members of the public. Why doesn't the First Minister take special measures himself to ensure that public confidence can be increased by being more open and transparent, just as in Aelodau'r we had problems only 2 weeks or so ago because of leaked reports? Why don't we have a more open and transparent health system? Why don't we make it more democratic?
Well, I can say the Cabinet Secretary has increased the oversight from ourselves on actions to reduce the forecast in terms of the finances and to ensure services and patients are not adversely affected by the need to improve financial management. We have said that. We expect the financial recovery actions to result in the Health Board meeting the revised forecast at the end of this year. We commissioned the Deloitte report in order to assist both the Board and ourselves in terms of planning for the future. And the Board is expected to demonstrate progress on the actions in that report to meet the recommendations set out by April of this year.
First Minister will remember that last week, in my paper my question on the agenda, I noted that the Deloitte report said that the financial and strategic planning at the Health Board is simplistic, with budgets generally rolled forward into next year. And again, the Leader of the Opposition pointed out the disastrous financial performance of these boards. Parts of this Deloitte's report also said there is limited insight regarding how the Health Board is ultimately going to recover the financial position, and a distinct lack of secondary questioning from board members to facilitate detailed debate and discussion across key areas of risk. Executive-level leadership capability and capacity needs to be enhanced. Labour has been in charge of the health service in Wales for 20 years nearly, since 1999. Does he accept personal responsibility for presiding over a health service that in many parts of the country is worthy only of the third world?
That is a wholly outrageous comment. Let me just educate him a little so he looks beyond his own nose. The third world is an old-fashioned and discriminatory description anyway. We talk of the developing world these days. Let me tell you. So, there was a hospital in Uganda in Mbale serving 7 million people. And several million people. It had 7 consultants serving all those people. You could have an endoscopy there, but if the endoscopy discovered some issue that had to be resolved, whether it was perhaps a stomach ulcer or worse, there was no treatment. People died of stomach cancer because they could not afford the treatment. Half the patients who entered that hospital went in there with malaria, which the doctors found very difficult to treat. Yes, they were able to perform miracles when it came to A&E, but many, many people died of preventable illnesses. And he stands there and he compares the Welsh Health Service with 1,000 consultants for 3 million people, and he compares it with those conditions I saw in Mbale. He belittles the people of Mbale and Uganda by his appalling comments.
Question 3, David Rowlands.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister outline the Welsh Government's concerns about the future of the Welsh agricultural industry in the light of Brexit?
Well, for decades, EU policy frameworks have shaped the management of our land, underpinned patterns of food production and supported farm incomes. And post-Brexit, our primary producers will be more exposed to global markets, and there will be greater friction in trading systems with significant negative consequences for the sheep meat sector in particular.
Well, I thank you for your answer, First Minister, but do you really believe that the EU and the CAP regime has been an unmitigated success story for the Welsh farming industry? Because if so, perhaps you and those supporting our presence in the European Union can explain to me the efficacy of seeing our hill farmers reduced to subsistence level on £12,000 per year, while some farmers in the southeast of England have become millionaires under this iniquitous regime. These hill farmers are a symbol of a once proud industry brought to its knees in becoming a begging bowl economy of grants and regulations. And add to this the fact that the Common Agricultural Policy is universally accepted as being an environmental disaster. Surely the First Minister has to agree that we are better off out.
Well, I'm sure the Leader of the Welsh Conservatives will agree with every word that the UKIP member has said. I doubt that somehow. CAP has been the method by which we have ensured that farmers are able to survive. It has supported farmers, supported rural economies, their social, cultural, environmental and linguistic development for many, many years. Is he now saying that he does not want there to be any kind of support for farmers in the future? Because I can tell him, as far as environmental schemes are concerned, we had Tir Cynnal, we had Tir Gofal, we had Glassy, we have schemes that help to support the environment. Over £200 million a year comes into Wales in European subsidies. At the moment, there is no guarantee beyond a certain year that we'll get a penny of money at all. I invite him to go to any hill farm in Wales and express his view that those farmers are holding a begging bull out and see what response he gets.
Mark Reckless.
First Minister, when I took an Assembly committee to Dublin and met the Taoiseach, I learnt how Ireland benefits by £2 billion because of privileged access to our beef and dairy markets in a customs union, with a quarter of our beef coming from Ireland. Isn't it the case that outside a customs union, it would be our choice either to trade freely and buy beef more cheaply elsewhere, or, if we preferred tariffs, to buy that beef from Welsh and UK farmers instead?
Cheap food is code for undermining British farming. That's what it means, because if you're not prepared to support the farming industry, not even with tariffs, then you end up with the cheapest imports coming in and wiping out our farming industry. That's what will happen. It's simple economics and something that has not been properly explained by those who say, well, just have cheap food, we'll buy it all around the world, no matter where it comes from, and who cares about our own farmers, especially those farmers who will lose access, the privileged access they have to the European market. Our sheep farmers cannot survive if they find themselves in a position where there are extra barriers in place in terms of them accessing the European market. It is their biggest market. 90% of our food and drink exports go there. We would be literally mad if we ignored the fact that we need to sort out access to that European single market first before following fantasies elsewhere.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd. Mae hwnna un fendith bifnidog, does dim un ffarmwr ag amser ganol dydd i wylio hyn. Ond pan o'ch chi draw yn Iwerddon yn ddiweddar, dwi'n gwybod os gawsych chi cyfle i brynu unrhyw beth mewn siop yn Iwerddon, ond os nethych chi, byddwch chi wedi derbyn dibyneb, ac ar y dibyneb byddai wedi gwaed faint o ganran o cynnyrch, bwyd a diod oedd wedi cynhyrchu o'r Iwerddon, faint o'ch chi wedi prynu. Wrth i ni adael yr Undeb Ewropeaidd, be ydych chi'n wneud i sicrhau bod ni dal yn gallu werthu bwyd o Gymru a diod o Gymru dros y ffin, fel bwyd a diod o Gymru, o dan stamp Cymraeg, a be ydych chi'n wneud i sicrhau bod ni'n cadw statws PGI sydd wedi cynyddu allfofio cigoen 50% ers ni ennill y statws hwnnw.
O hynny'n iawn, mae'n gwestiwn ni beth ni'n digwydd y PGI a PDO. Fydd yna system Prydeinig, bydd y system hynny ar yr un tylerau, a'r system Ewropeaidd, bydd yn cael ei adnabod yn un ffordd a'r system Ewropeaidd. Mae fe'n holl bwysig bod ni'n gallu gwarchod y ffaith bod gyda ni cig o'n er enghraifft sydd o'r safon ucha. Mae cig o'n Cymraeg yn cael ei dderbyn mewn sawl marchnad ar draws y byd. Rwy'n peth gyda cig eidion o Gymru a sawl fath o gynnyrch arall. Beth ni ddim moyn gweld yw sefyllfa lle mae rhywun sy'n moyn cystadlu yn herbyn ni yn gallu mynd mewn i'r fachled Ewropeaidd ar lefel sydd yn well ar y lefel sydd bydd gyda ni yn y pen draw. Ni'n gwybod ar hyn o bryd bod yna ffermwyr yn gwledydd fel Ffrainc a Sbaen yn gweld nawr bod yna wahoddiad i nhw. Os mae cig o'n y Gymru yn mynd yn brytach yn y farchnad Ewropeaidd, felly mae yna gyfle i nhw i fanteisio ar hwnna a dwi'n ddim o les i ffermwyr Cymru. Does na ddim ffordd i ddadle, a dwi'n ddim yn dadle hwn, ond does ddim ffordd o ddadle o gwbl bydd ffermwyr cig o'n Cymru yn well tu fas i'r farchnad sengl. Heb y farchnad hynny, bydd y dyfodol i sawl un o'n ffermwyr ni yn un dwyll dros ben.
Cwestiwn 4, Rhina Piorwerth.
Y prif weinidog ddatganiad am oblygiadau gadael yr Undeb Ewropeaidd i borthladd Caergybi.
Wel, ni'n pwyso ar Lywodraeth y Dain Senedd i sicrhau nad yw porthladdoedd Cymru gan gynnwys Caergybi yn mynd i fod o dan anfantais yn sgil Brexit. Nes i drafod hwn gyda busnesau yn yr Iwerddon ddo. Mae'n holl bwysig bod nwyddau yn gallu cael ei symud yn effeithiol o hyd a rhaid i'r trefniadau tollau didor i barhau.
Diolch am yr ymateb yna. Mae werth atgoffa pobl bod masnach drwy borthladd Caergybi wedi cynyddu bron iawn i 700% ers dechrau y farchnad sengl. Allwn ni ddim fforddio gweld Cymru, porthladd Caergybi, ddim yn rhan o undeb tolla, ddim yn rhan o farchnad sengl. Dwi'n poeni am oblygiadau tariffs ar fasnach. Mi fydda llwybra newydd yn cael ei datblygu'n sicr rhwng Iwerddon a chyfandir Ewrop. Does na ddim lle yn gorfforol ym mhorthladd Caergybi i ddelio efo checs ar loris ac yn y blaen. Rwan dwi'n falch yn wahanol i arweinydd eich plaid chi Jeremy Corbyn, o'ch clywed chi'n deud eich bod chi'n credu mewn aros yn yr undeb tolla ar farchnad sengl. Ond beth ydych chi'n fodlon wneud am y peth? Pa mor bell ydych chi'n fodlon gwthio hyn? Mae seneddau is-wladwriaethol eraill yn Ewrop yn gallu cael gwir ddylanwad, fito hyd yn oed mewn rhai enghreifftiau dros benderfyniad y wladwriaeth. Pa mor bell ydych chi yn dymuno gweld dylanwad Cymru yn mynd o ran penderfynu ar ein llais ni a grymoedd Cymru ar ôl i ni adael yr Undeb Ewropeaidd?
Doi beth fyna. Un o'r pethau gath i ddweud wrtho fi ddo yw, mae'n holl bwysig wrth gwrs bod unrhyw fath o arafu yng Nghaergybi na Doc Penfro nag Abergwaun, ond hefyd holl bwysig i'r Iwerddon bod yna ddim arafu yn Dover hefyd. Mae siw gymaint yn nwy mynd trwyddo Cymru, trwyddo Lloegr, a wedyn i Ffrainc o Dover. A'r ofon sydd gyda nhw, bydd yna arafu yn y ddoi borthladd. Fe roen nhw enghraifft i fi lle oedd na loriau gyda pysgod yn mynd dros y môr. Oedd y fferi wedi bod yn hwyr yn croesi y môr Werydd, ac achos hynny fe gollodd y loriau hynny y fferi yn Portsmouth. Achos hynny, popeth wedi strwag. A'r ofon sydd gyda nhw yw bydd hwnna'n rhywbeth arferol yn y pen draw. Mae'n iawn i ddweud, does na ddim strwythur o gwbl yn Nghaergybi, na hyd yn oed yn Dover ar hyn o bryd. Mae'n amhosib i tseco bob lori ynglyn â tolled ta beth, yr enghraifft sydd wedi cael i rhoi. A'r ail gwestiwn, fi wedi gweud yn blwmp ac yn blaen, dyle unrhyw gytundeb gael ei roi o flaen y cynulliad cyn ar Alban, Gogledd Iwerddon ni'n gobeithio cyn bo hir wrth gwrs, ac wrth gwrs San Steffan, a dyle fod yna bleidlais i gytuno y cytundeb hynny gan pob Senedd, a nid dim ond gyda un. A fy marn i, heb hynny, bydd unrhyw fath o gytundeb ddim yn parhau.
Mark Isherwood.
Well, both the Economy Infrastructure Skills Committee and the External Affairs Committee have gathered evidence from people like the Canadian consulate in Brussels, the Irish government and others, giving us examples of how low-friction trade occurs across borders and through ports. We know the Irish ferries last month confirmed their order for what will be the largest ferry, 165.2 million ferry in the world in terms of vehicle capacity to run between Dublin and Holyhead. And last Thursday, the Economy Infrastructure Skills Committee took evidence on Anglesey from Anglesey Economic Zone Board on the Holyhead Port Expansion Plan, which includes provision for Brexit. What consideration, therefore, have you given to the report from the European Parliament quote, avoiding a hard border on the island of Ireland for customs control and the free movement of persons, which looks at a number of technological solutions and comes to a positive conclusion about how to create a low-friction border? That's from the European Parliament itself.
Well, I met with Irish Ferries yesterday, so I discussed with them their plans, and it was good, as I said earlier on, that they are looking to invest in new ships. But the Road Haulage Association in Ireland are very, very concerned about the potential for delay. They don't see border controls in terms of there being passport controls, but their concern is A, will there be customs checks, and B, will they be comprehensive or random? They were never comprehensive in the past, they were always random. And in reality, there is no other way of doing customs checks without having miles and miles of traffic queuing. My argument is this: I want to see an open border between North and South Ireland. I know that border exceptionally well. And I know it's impossible to seal it, if that's the word you want to use, in any event. In the days of the Troubles, minor roads were blown up by the British Army, and there were crossing points at various main roads. That's before there was a motorway built across the border. So in reality, it's impossible to police that border from a customs perspective. Good, if a way is found of doing that, I have no argument. But my argument is this: the same arrangements must apply to the maritime border between Ireland and Wales. We can't afford to have a situation where the maritime border is seen as more difficult, more bureaucratic and more troublesome for freight operators than the border between North and Southern Ireland. Why? There's an incentive there for goods to move through Northern Ireland into the Scottish ports and into Liverpool, and to avoid the Welsh ports if that border is seen as more problematic. If it applies to one, it has to apply to all.
Question 5, Lee Waters.
What assessment has the First Minister made of the Centre for Cities analysis that 112,000 workers could face losing their jobs in Swansea, Cardiff and Newport alone as a result of automation?
Well, predictions of this sort are never straightforward, but we know that there will be a destruction of some jobs by new technology that we have to accept. The question, of course, then is, can we then be a net creator of jobs through advances in technologies? And addressing challenges and opportunities presented by automation and digitisation is at the heart of our economic action plan.
Thank you. The predictions are consistent with other analyses. China recently unveiled plans for a £1.5 billion research park dedicated to the development of artificial intelligence. The United Arab Emirates have appointed a minister for AI and announced a cross-government strategy. Their Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed has said, "We want the UAE to become the world's most prepared country for artificial intelligence." Countries all across the world are gearing up to face the challenges and grasp the opportunities that automation presents, and Wales needs to act fast to be a shaper, not just an adopter of new technologies. Does the First Minister agree we need cross-government action, and will he commit to establishing a unit to get Wales ready for automation?
We do need cross-government action, there's no question about that, because I know that by virtue of the member and his huge interest in this, and he flags up an issue a challenge that we must meet in the future. Well, I can say that groups across Welsh Government are already exploring the impact of technology and data on public service delivery. We obviously work with businesses. I know the Cabinet Secretary is considering the creation of a FinTech task and finish group to look at the technology surrounding financial and professional services. Building on the Digital Action Plan, that lays out our own commitments to improving our own digital services, and we are working with the UK Government as well. Actively engaged with the recently launched UK Knowledge Transfer Networks for Manufacturing initiative, which is aimed at realising, and you recognise the phrase, of course, the fourth industrial revolution. And that team is exploring ways to optimise the application of that programme to Wales. There are other programmes that we have taken forward, but I can assure the member that we know that the challenge is there, and we intend to meet that challenge.
Nick Ramsey.
First Minister Lee Waters just rightly referred to the urban hubs of South Wales as being most vulnerable in the first instance to the effect of automation, and the figures that Lee Waters quoted were astounding. I agreed with your answer that we need to make sure that we are trying to get ahead of the curve in terms of competing with other countries in this respect and making sure that the challenges posed by artificial intelligence are dealt with. But I didn't hear your answer. Can you give us some concrete examples of how you are going to refocus Welsh Government economic policies to face these challenges ahead, to make sure that areas such as Newport, Cardiff and Swansea, also other urban areas of Wales, but also the city regions areas which they support and which support them, will also be able to meet the challenge of the future and get ahead of the curve which we desperately need?
Well, our economic action plan clearly identifies the automation and digitalisation challenges that we face, key strategic challenges and opportunities. Just to build on the answer I gave to the member for Senedd, we will be launching our enhanced smart innovation business support in April 2018 for manufacturing and design processes. That will include support to businesses for planning and preparing for the implementation of technologies associated with the fourth industrial revolution. And over the last 12 months, Industry Wales has supplied a number of reports to the Cabinet Secretary on the risks and opportunities that automation will have on the Welsh economy.
Question 6, Darren Miller.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's relationships with international governments and sub-regional administrations?
Yes, we have relations with many governments and sub-regional governments at many different levels and through different channels, both formal and informal.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. At the beginning of the year, Open Doors published its annual World Watch list, which is a list of the world's worst persecuting nations for Christians to be living in. And many of the nations which are mentioned on that list are nations which the Welsh Government has relationships with: Pakistan, India, Qatar, Vietnam, as an example. Now, clearly, where the Welsh Government has a relationship, it has a dialogue with those governments. And I wonder what action the Welsh Government is taking or could take in order to discuss the infringement of Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights for Christians living in those nations where their right to change their religion and their right to practice their religion is not being realised.
Of course, an individual's right to freedom of conscience. I have raised human rights issues in the past in some countries that I have been to, not shied away from that. Of course, we take advice from the Foreign Office, hugely important with their network of embassies and, of course, their access to intelligence that we take advice from them. But nobody, of course, could possibly condone a situation where freedom of conscience is not respected.
Adam Price.
Mae gan rai llywodraethau ranbarthol fel Flandres er enghraifft, fel oedd un abiodwyth yn pwyntio mas, fito dros dermau terfynol cytundeb Brexit. Nad oes gan Gymru ar hyn o bryd y ddim. Wrth gwrs, fel byddai'r prif weinidog yn gwybod, mae cysylltiad hanesyddol agos iawn rhwng Cymru a Flandres. A fyddai'r prif weinidog yn ystyried arwain dirprwyaeth i Flandres, i apelio iddyn nhw, os oes rhaid, i ddefnyddio'r grym sydd ganddyn nhw i helpu Cymru yn ein awr ni o angen, fel nath wrth gwrs Cymru yn 'i miloedd 100 mlynedd yn ôl drostyn nhw.
Wel, wedi bod i Flandres sawl gwaith, wrth gwrs, ar fewn yr aelod yn gweud, mae yna gysylltiad hanesyddol a hefyd trist dros ben rhwng Cymru a Flandres. Wel, i fi, beth wi moyn sicrhau bod ni'n pwyso ar Llywodraeth y Senedd yn gynta i roi rhyw fath o sôn ni'n beth yn gwmws i'w cynlluniau nhw. Achos does dim clem da neb ar hyn o bryd, beth yn gwmws maen nhw moyn gweld ar ddiwedd y broses hyn. A ni moyn sicrhau trwy'r trafod sy'n cymryd lle ar hyn o bryd. Yn gyntaf, wrth gwrs, bod y bil sydd yn tynnu mas o Ewrop yn cael ei newid yn y ffordd sydd yn dderbyniol i Gymru a hefyd i'r Alban, a hefyd, wrth gwrs, i bwyso ar Llywodraeth y Senedd i sicrhau cytundeb ar ddiwedd y dydd sydd o les i Gymru a hefyd Prydain Mawr.
Michelle Brown.
Thank you. What work has the First Minister done since the referendum with international governments outside the EU to encourage investment into Wales?
Many things. Been to many countries. The US, of course, is our biggest international investing country. I've been there. I was in Ireland yesterday. Ireland is in the top 5 of investing countries in Wales. Of course, we look at markets outside Europe. One of the things I did when I was Rural Affairs Minister was to get Welsh Lamb into Dubai, looking at a new market beyond the traditional Southern European market. But nevertheless, we cannot, on the one hand, say we need to look at new markets, which we accept, but on the other hand, say we have to ignore our most important existing single market, which is Europe. The two things run together. Let's make sure that we secure our most important market first, and then, of course, make sure that we look for more opportunities elsewhere.
Question 7, Gareth Bennett.
Diolch, Llywydd. What steps is the Welsh Government taking to improve the welfare of puppies and dogs in Wales?
Well, we take animal welfare seriously and expect others to do so too. The Animal Welfare Breeding of Dogs Wales Regulations 2014 introduced stricter criteria for licensed puppy breeders, and we recently consulted on a revised code of practice for the welfare of dogs, and the code reminds owners of their responsibilities and obligations.
Yes, thanks. Thanks for the previous initiatives. The UK Government is currently looking at bringing in tighter regulations for dog breeding in England. In the light of that, is it possible that we may need to look at tighter regulations again in Wales, given recent cases, such as Lucy's Law?
Well, I mean, I have to say that DEFRA followed us. Actually, we were the first to introduce regulations of this sort, and DEFRA is now following suit. We do note the fact that DEFRA have issued a call of evidence on the banning of third-party sales, and we'll consider our own position in due course. But this is certainly a situation where we were ahead of the game and others are following.
Joyce Watson.
Llywydd. In recent years, the sale of puppies and dogs has moved to online sales, and many sick animals have been sold to unsuspecting people. And those sellers are very often not licensed to breed it, and they're certainly not putting the welfare of the animals first, but profit. And the Blue Cross are calling for a registration and licensing system for anyone breeding or selling animals through any means whatsoever, so whether that's from home or from large-scale breeding establishments to include online sellers. Do you think this is something that we might consider doing here in the Welsh Government?
I think there are two issues here. Firstly, to examine whether there's a need for further legislation, but secondly, to ensure that enforcement is what we would want it and expect it to be. I know that local authorities in Wales have recently undertaken a data capture survey on licensed dog breeding premises in Wales, and that exercise has served as an opportunity to assess the standards currently applied to dog breeders in Wales, to identify and investigate examples of poor compliance, best practice, and also to improve intelligence to better inform enforcement intervention by local authorities. So the enforcement, of course, is hugely important in terms of the current law.
Will the First Minister give an update on Welsh Government plans to enhance educational facilities in Islwyn?
Well, Band A of the 21st Century Schools programme will see investment of over £58 million in schools in Caerphilly County Borough, with over £28 million spent in the Islwyn constituency, and a funding envelope for Caerphilly of over £110 million for Band B, continuing, or rather beginning in 2019, has been approved in principle.
Thank you. The Welsh Government also has announced an extra £73 million allocated to the 21st Century Schools Education Programme, and this brings the total amount invested to £3.8 billion. First Minister, as you witnessed yourself when you formally opened Islwyn High, the infrastructure of Welsh schools are being reimagined and rebuilt to serve future generations. How then can this radical, transformative initiative be maintained in the years ahead so Wales never has to witness again the decaying school buildings of the Thatcher and Major eras when the Conservatives were last in charge of educational government policy in Wales?
Well, many of us were in school in the 1980s, and despite the best efforts of our teachers, we were taught in buildings that were falling apart, porta cabins. I remember one porta cabin where there was ivy growing up the inside of the wall because there was a gap between the floor and the wall. I saw heating systems that didn't work. I saw no new schools being built. Compare that to now. Compare that to now, where we have over 150 schools and colleges in Wales which will be refurbished or replaced in the 5 years to 2019. That's 150 schools and colleges that, under the Tories, would have been left to decay.
Presiding Officer, further to that question, could the First Minister advise when details of which schools and colleges in South East Wales will be modernised under Band B of the 21st Century Schools and Education Programmes will be announced, and how will these building schemes address the growth in demand for Welsh medium education in my region especially?
Well, I can say that as far as Caerphilly is concerned, the Gwyndy campus is complete. The Islwyn High School is opened. Pontlotyn and Abertyswg replacement schools, construction is underway there. And of course, there is the new Idris Davies Primary School, which will be built as well, just to give some examples. But as I said to the member earlier on, it is rich for the Tories to say, well, you know, give us an example of schools being built when they would have built nothing. They would have built nothing at all. 150 schools and colleges that have been rebuilt, built or refurbished by Welsh Labour that the Tories would never have touched.
Diolch i'r Prif Weinidog. Yr eitem